I got it.
I got a repo paper on it.
I got a repo warrant on it too,
That's my
cuz.
point, dude. I could have fired you.
You just make sure they don't kill one another.
How you gonna do that to me?
Alex Shirley, that is the son of the Lizard Lick Towing star Ronnie Shirley, who many know of Ronnie in that show. And Shirley, Alex, one of these victims in this case, he was killed.
They weren't just a reality TV cast. They were chaos you couldn't look away from. Lizard Lick Towing turned debt collection into primetime spectacle. Backroad chases, parking lot confrontations, and a family living every moment like the cameras would never stop rolling. Because, for a while, they didn't. But what happens when the cameras suddenly go silent? No finale, no goodbye. Just an ending that felt unfinished. And what happened next is the part no episode ever showed. And it's even more intense than anything that aired on TV. The real story before the cameras. Ron Shirley was born on the 12th of April, 1972, in Raleigh, North Carolina. And his path to reality television fame was built on the kind of foundation that nobody would have predicted. He was a college football player whose career was derailed by an injury serious enough to force a complete pivot.
Sir, I was in college trying to do a little college football, work my way through college, and I was on a house, and I got struck by lightning.
No degree, no fallback plan, no family connections in any industry that offered a clear path forward. What he had was a willingness to do the work that other people avoided. And in the early 1990s, that willingness led him into one of the most confrontational, adrenaline-fueled, and physically dangerous professions in blue-collar America: repossession and towing. The towing and repossession business in the rural South is not the sanitized version you might imagine from a corporate parking enforcement company. It is knocking on doors at midnight. It is hooking up a vehicle while the owner watches from a window and decides whether to come outside with words or something worse. It is navigating a world where every job carries the potential for confrontation, and where the margin between a routine pickup and a dangerous encounter is measured in the temperament of whoever answers the door. Ron did not just survive in that world, he thrived. Because he had a quality that most people in the business did not. He could talk. He could diffuse. He could walk up to a person who was about to lose their car and make them understand that he was not the enemy, that he was just doing a job, and that fighting him was not going to change the outcome. That skill, the ability to be simultaneously intimidating and empathetic, would eventually make him a television star. But first, it made him a very effective repo man. In 1998, Ron launched Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery with a single truck. No investors. No business plan written by an MBA. Just one truck, one man, and the stubborn conviction that he could build something out of nothing in a town so small that the name itself sounded like a joke. Lizard Lick, North Carolina. A community in the rural eastern part of the state with a population that has never cracked 1,000. The kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the church parking lot is the social center, and where a man with a tow truck and a reputation for being fair could build a business through word of mouth alone. And then there was Amy. Calling Amy Shirley just Ron's wife is like calling a hurricane just some wind. Before the show, before the fame, before any camera ever pointed at her, Amy was a record-holding powerlifter who had competed at the national level. She had trained in mixed martial arts. She had worked as a mortician, which is a sentence that tells you everything you need to know about her comfort level.
Amy's a former world champion powerlifter. She's also a licensed mortician, and she's also an MMA fighter. And Wife Swap came to us and wanted to put us on a show.
With situations that would make most people deeply uncomfortable. She co-ran the towing business with Ron, handled the books, managed the staff, and brought a combination of toughness and organizational intelligence that transformed a one-truck operation into a legitimate fleet business. By the time television producers came knocking, Lizard Lick Towing had grown to a fleet of trucks, a full crew, and a reputation across the region that was built entirely on the personalities of the people running it. The television opportunity arrived almost by accident. Ron and Amy were originally approached for the show Wife Swap. One day of filming was all it took for producers to realize they had something far more compelling than a family swap format could contain. The energy between Ron and Amy, the chaos of the towing business, the cast of characters who worked at the shop, all of it was bigger than any format that had been designed for it. The producers pivoted, and Lizard Lick Towing, the show, was born. The show that had America losing its mind. Lizard Lick Towing premiered on True TV in 2011 and ran for 4 seasons through 2014, producing 91 episodes that turned a small-town towing company into a national obsession. The premise was deceptively simple. A towing company repossesses vehicles from people who have defaulted on their payments. That is it. That is the entire concept. But the execution was anything but simple. Because every repossession was a potential confrontation, and the people involved were so naturally magnetic that even a routine pickup became must-watch television. Ron was the anchor. Loud, physically imposing, built like a man who had spent his youth on a football field and his adulthood hauling steel, he dominated every scene he was in through sheer force of personality. But he was not a one-dimensional tough guy. There was warmth underneath the volume. He cared about the people he was dealing with, even the ones who were screaming at him. And that genuine empathy is what made him compelling rather than just intimidating. Amy was the counterbalance, equally capable of calming a volatile situation or escalating it depending on what the moment required. She was the brains, the backbone, and the one person on the show who could out-stubborn Ron when it mattered. And then there was Bobby Brantley. Bobby was the wild card, Ron's best friend and right-hand man, a human lightning bolt who looked permanently 2 seconds away from tackling whoever was standing closest to him. The chemistry between Ron, Amy, and Bobby was the engine that made the show work. It was unpredictable, combustible, and somehow always entertaining. Behind them, a supporting cast that included Big Juicy, the front office presence whose real name is Elaine McGilvery, and whose comic timing was sharper than half the writers in Hollywood. Crazy Dave Eckler, the shop mechanic whose energy level suggested he had never once in his life experienced a calm moment. Cousin Johnny, Ron's cousin and professional chaos generator.
He's now part of the team.
But when Johnny steps in to save the day,
On the gate! Johnny, on the gate!
I won't have to hurt you. Take it easy.
not everyone wants the helping hand.
Just stay out of my way.
And Swirly Earl, the tow truck driver who quietly did his job, while everyone around him lost their minds. At its peak, the show was pulling nearly 3 million viewers per episode. 3 million people, every Monday night, watching a towing company in a town most of them had never heard of repossess cars from people who did not want to give them up. The show was talked about the next day at work. It generated memes before memes were the dominant form of cultural communication. It was appointment television, in an era when appointment television was already dying. But there was a question underneath all of it that the audience started asking louder as the seasons went on. And it was the question that would eventually help bring the show down. The truth behind Lizard Lick Towing. Here is where it gets complicated. Because the authenticity question is the one that the show could never fully outrun. True TV, the network that aired Lizard Lick Towing, did not actually classify the series as reality television. They used a different word: actuality. Their entire branding at the time was built around the tagline, "Not reality, actuality," which sounds like a very confident way to sidestep a very uncomfortable question. The company was real. The people were real. The repossessions happened. But the level of drama that played out on screen, the shouting matches, the physical confrontations, the perfectly timed escalations, those were scripted reenactments based loosely on things that had actually occurred. And honestly, for most of the show's run, nobody cared. The personalities were compelling enough that the question of whether a particular confrontation was real or staged was secondary to whether Ron was about to flip a table or Amy was about to put someone in their place. The entertainment value did not depend on strict authenticity. It depended on the characters. And the characters were undeniably real people being themselves, just in situations that had been constructed to maximize drama. But as reality television audiences became more sophisticated, more aware of how these shows were manufactured, the shine began to wear off. Viewers who had been completely sold on the chaos started questioning it. And once you start questioning the authenticity of a show whose entire appeal is its authenticity, the foundation cracks in a way that is very difficult to repair. By the time Season 4 arrived in 2014, the landscape had shifted beneath the show's feet. Cable television was fragmenting. New reality shows were launching every week, all competing for the same shrinking attention span. True TV itself was in a period of strategic transition, rethinking its programming identity. And then Bobby Brantley left.
Bobby, I always taking care of you. You've left me for
And I ain't never
girls,
taking
you
care of
left me
you.
for people, you left me for
And I ain't never took care of you.
Bobby's departure to pursue his own business opportunities removed the third leg of the stool that had held the show up for 4 years. The chemistry between Ron, Amy, and Bobby had been the irreplaceable element, the thing that no amount of scripted confrontations could manufacture. Reports of growing tension between Bobby and Ron surfaced, tensions that would later spill into public disagreements after the show ended. The dynamic that had made Monday nights electric was broken. The final episode aired on the 18th of August 2014. No farewell, no emotional send-off, no reunion special, just the last episode, and then silence. 91 episodes of chaos, and then nothing. The show ended the way most reality television ends, not with a bang, but with a network executive deciding the numbers no longer justified the cost. The night everything changed. There is no easy way to transition into this part of the story, so the only honest approach is to be direct. On the 17th of February 2022, Ron Shirley's son, Harley Alexander Shirley, was murdered. He was 21 years old. Harley had attended a memorial gathering that evening to honor a friend who had been killed in a traffic accident. He was sitting in the back seat of a parked vehicle at a gas station when two teenagers, 17-year-old Joshua Stewart and 16-year-old Nathan Christopher Jackson, fired 20 shots into the back of the vehicle. Harley was the intended target. He was killed.
21-year-old Harley Alexander Shirley was found shot to death at the Sheets on Cornwallis Road in Garner last Thursday night.
A 20-year-old woman named Sophie Catherine Hagee, who was sitting next to Harley, was also shot. Sophie was permanently paralyzed from the waist down. According to prosecutors, she was not an intended target. A GoFundMe campaign, created in Sophie's name, raised over $80,000 as the community rallied around her and her family. Authorities eventually made 4 arrests in connection with the case. 2 teenagers were charged with murder and attempted murder. Additional adults were charged with obstruction of justice and accessory after the fact. A 5th suspect was also identified. The legal proceedings stretched across years. One defendant, convicted in 2024, received a 40-year sentence, a rare outcome for a case involving a juvenile defendant and a fatality. In July 2025, Joshua Christopher Stewart, by then 21, was sentenced after pleading guilty to second-degree murder and attempted murder. He received consecutive sentences totaling between approximately 29 and 37 years. Johnston County District Attorney Jason Waller said his office would continue to prosecute violent crimes to the fullest extent of the law, and that their hearts continued to go out to the Shirley family and to Sophie Hagee's family. In the days after losing his son, Ron Shirley did something that very few people in that kind of pain could do. He went to social media, the same platform he had spent years using to entertain millions of people, and he spoke about faith, about grief, about holding on. He shared messages of forgiveness. He encouraged dialogue about violence and empathy. He did not retreat into silence. He did not disappear. He stood in front of the same audience that had watched him chase debtors down dirt roads, and he showed them something that no reality television episode had ever contained: real grief, real strength, the kind that does not perform for cameras because it has nothing left to perform. There is a version of this story where a tragedy that enormous breaks a family entirely. And there is another version, the one that Ron and Amy are actually living, where you carry the loss with you every single day, and you keep going anyway. Not because the pain stops, because stopping would mean the pain wins. Life after Lizard Lick. As of 2025, Ron Shirley runs Lizard Lick Towing and Recovery, with a fleet of 20 trucks and a staff of 15. He is also an ordained pastor, leading the Eastern chapter of Dirt Church, a ministry that meets people where they are, rather than waiting for them to show up at a building with a steeple. He co-founded a ministry focused on helping people through addiction and abuse, which is the kind of detail that makes the distance between his television persona and his actual life feel enormous, and somehow completely consistent at the same time. Amy continues, as vice president of the business, published a cookbook called Gluten-Free in Lizard Lick, and describes herself on social media as Still Got the Lick, which is genuinely the best personal brand statement in the history of the internet. And here is the detail that tells you everything about where this story stands. In 2025, Lizard Lick Towing has a TikTok account with over 1 million followers. 1 million. No network deal. No production company. No true TV. Just Ron, Amy, the crew, and the trucks, doing what they have always done, being themselves on camera. And America is still watching. A decade after the show was canceled, the audience found them again on a platform that did not exist when the show was on the air. The content is not scripted reenactments. It is just the Shirleys being the Shirleys. And it turns out that was always the part people wanted. Bobby Brantley is living on Lil Ass Farms in Pilot, North Carolina, with his wife Melanie, who viewers knew as Cassie on the show. Melanie is a gynecologist and television personality. They have 8 children. In 2019, Bobby was diagnosed with pituitary adenoma, a form of brain tumor that was surgically removed. He recovered, embraced farm life, and still makes appearances at fan events with the original crew. A man who started as a dissatisfied towing customer became one of reality television's most beloved characters, survived a brain tumor, and is now raising 8 children on a farm in rural North Carolina. That is not a television arc. That is a life. Big Juicy keeps her personal life private, but is known to be raising her 3 children and remains connected to the Lizard Lick family through community events. Crazy Dave Eckler is making music in Rocky Cross, North Carolina, writing and singing as part of a project called the Rocky Cross Project, which is somehow the most crazy Dave thing that could possibly happen, and which his fans love him for. Cousin Johnny has retired completely from public life, maintains no social media accounts, and has chosen silence after years of being one of the loudest people on television, which is either deeply ironic or deeply understandable, depending on how you think about it. And Swirly Earl is still listed on the Lizard Lick Towing website as a tow truck driver. Some things do not change, and sometimes the things that do not change are the ones that matter most. The cameras may have left in 2014, but nothing about Lizard Lick ever truly stopped moving. No finale, no clean ending, just a town, a business, and a family that kept showing up long after the world stopped watching. Because some stories aren't built for television, they outlive it. They evolve, they fracture, they rebuild in silence. And now, years later, with the noise of reality TV long gone, one question still hangs over it all. When the cameras disappear, and only real life remains, what exactly are we still witnessing? And who decides when the story is finally over?